Ray Donovan, and One Tree Hill. He has also graced the stages of major festivals like Coachella, Stagecoach, Outside Lands, and NPR's Mountain Stage. Not only that, but Alex has lent his production skills to artists such as Delta Ray and Vienna Tang. In 2021, Alex launched the Quiet Voice Fund with the core idea that you don't need to be loud to be strong. His Show Yourself benefit concert series raised over $16,000 for the fund. This year, Alex introduced the Permission Parties, a unique experience where each track from his upcoming album Permission is paired with a Chinese-inspired dish that embodies a common emotion. Through this, he addresses his own struggle with feeling permitted to take up space, especially as a second-generation Chinese American. His goal is to empower everyone, particularly those on the fringes, to embrace his strategies, stories, and occupy their space. The initial 5-night Nashville run of the Permission Parties was a hit, leading to the first ever listening and tasting tour across the U.S. this fall. So, before we get into it, if you want to find out more about Home and what we're doing here, go ahead and hit up helpingourmusic.org to find out more. And now, without further ado, let's get going with Producers Unpacked. All right, everybody, welcome to Producers Unpacked. How's everybody doing? Go ahead and say what's up in the chat. We're going to get this thing going. So just a quick little reminder, we're going to get some questions answered halfway through, but I'm going to get this thing started by saying, what is up, Alex? How are you doing today, man?
It's so nice to be here. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you for being in the space. So we'll jump right into this thing. So we gave a cool intro, but of course, I want to know how you entered the Earth. So tell me where you're from, maybe just how you first got music in your life.
Well, I think I'm from the planet Polaris. That's what I was told. And this is one of my lifetimes. We're just doing it here. No, I started. I'm from California.
Okay.
And I started pretty young. Like a lot of people, just like banging on pots and pans. My mom played piano. She taught me my first piano lessons.
Really?
Yeah. And then after sort of like a quick, I remember a quick battle to get my parents to allow me to take the drums. That was the instrument I really wanted to take. Then they were really supportive, and I was kind of off to the races. And I went to school for classical music, actually, for classical percussion.
So you're classically trained in percussion?
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought I was going to be in an orchestra and play on movie scores and that sort of thing. And then life just happened, and I was in school, and I started playing with this rock band in school. The first time I'd ever played with a rock band.
Okay.
That band ended up getting signed to Epic Records for a couple years. So we moved to LA, and I did that, and then, as many bands do, we got dropped and we broke up. And then I was like, well, I don't really know now. I thought I knew what I wanted, and now I've discovered this whole other world of pop music and kind of like these 3-minute creations where you could do anything you want, and sort of the idea of like making my own stuff had never entered my head before. I was just sort of playing repertoire and playing other people's music. And so I was lucky to meet someone in LA who became kind of a mentor. He was a producer, composer, and kind of opened me up to the idea that I could, make my own music. And so that really started what I think is my path, my main path. So
it's like, after being dropped by a band, is really
I worked for a year as a graphic designer at a web company, and
that's totally left field.
And I was like figuring it out, and I do think like realizing that I could create my music, or even we talked about the permission parties, and a lot of that permission of allowing yourself to tell your own story was something that hadn't occurred to me when I was coming up. And so it's been a long path of kind of learning how to do that, how to tell my own story, how to help other people tell their stories. And so it's a twisty, turny path that I always tell people in music, like I thought I knew what I wanted to do. Then it went over here, and then it went over here, and then it got refined, and so
The everybody journey,
it,
right?
yeah, it's it takes as long as it takes, you know.
Exactly. So let's reel back a little bit because I know you said that you started in percussion. What was your first drum? I know you said pots and pans, but what was the first? Did you get like a
My
training
first
pad?
drum was a CB 700 white snare drum. That the deal was, so I was taking piano like a good Asian kid, you know,
Hmm.
taking piano lessons, and the deal was I had to continue to take piano if I wanted to take drum lessons.
Really?
And
Was it that your
so
parents didn't see drums as a valid instrument versus piano,
I
or?
think they were just looking at the noise factor maybe, and they're like,
Yeah.
maybe he'll grow out of this phase if we, you know, placate him with. So they're like, we'll get you one drum. You got
Hmm.
to practice this one drum for 3 years, and then we'll get you another drum. And it was actually good because I all I could do was like rudiments,
Yeah.
and so I did that. I had this little practice pad and the drum, and I still have that drum. Actually, it's a, you know, it's not a great quality drum, but it sounds cool,
Yeah.
and it's like it feels like it weighs like 1 pound, you know. But
That's huge, though.
yeah, so I got that, and then it just kind of I didn't stop.
It just
So
went from there.
yeah,
Okay, so then you got with this band. Was everybody on the same page? How did you all meet? What's kind of that story on how you formed?
they were they were formed. So this was another I think a big part of my like education that I really carry with me because they were all self-taught.
Yeah.
They were all didn't go to, you know, they lived in the town where I went to school, but they weren't in school, and so they were often. I found myself like when I was with them, they would, you know, mock me for being like a
Like the classical.
nerdy, you
Yeah.
know, studied musician, and then I would go to music school, and they would, you know, do the same thing in the opposite direction. It's
Right.
like, you know,
It's like,
this
oh,
isn't
look at this
serious
kid.
music, and
Yeah.
but I really learned so much about how these guys experienced music, how they learned, how they, you know, interacted with it. That was
Hmm.
so different from what we learned in school that I took that. Also because they were older, you know, they were like older and cooler. I was like the runt. I think I was like 19
Oh,
or
so you
something.
essentially got brought into their world
Yes, yeah, very
versus.
much. I was not a writer yet. I
Okay.
didn't, you know, I was playing their music. And so they kind of introduced me to what was my first influence of like genres. They were really into like Britpop. It was like
Okay.
really into like The Cure and the Smiths and, you know, bands like that. Happy Mondays, U2, Radiohead, and so that was like the first time I had to really like drink from a fire hose and like, you know, you can listen to genres, but
All day.
to internalize and to like to the point
Emulate.
where
Yeah.
you're not playing a genre, but you're really like
That's
living and
you.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know, and that's what I think what really was the difference, like seeing these guys and how they lived and breathed this music that they cared about, and it was, I mean, they weren't the most versatile musicians,
Hmm.
but they really like had a they were authentically connected to that music, and
So
it's like
therefore, whatever they made was right on par.
yeah, and to get to that point, you can't just study it. You know, you have to really like be about it and like be about the culture and all that stuff. And so
So
that was like a big lesson for me to be like, you know, school is cool and it's one thing, and it's definitely like one route to learning a lot about music. Also, there's this whole other way that you can interact with music that doesn't necessarily have to do with
right.
school,
Hmm.
and there's advantages and disadvantages to both. And so I always felt like a student in both
No matter
sides,
what.
where
Yeah.
they were always teaching me, you know, so much about performance and about just how music can be part of your life and lifestyle and all that stuff. And so when we moved down as a band to LA to do, you know, to pursue this deal and everything, it was like I was like living that life for
Yeah.
a couple years, and
For all.
I think I was very obnoxious to a lot of my friends at that time because I thought I was hot shit,
Yep.
and I was like, music industry is easy.
Yeah.
We just
I'm
got, you
killing it out
graduate and you
here.
just get signed. It's easy.
It's never like that. Just so anybody
And then
knows.
I discovered what it's really about,
Yeah.
and that it's a life path.
Life path. So, what was your transition? where you felt like a super student versus now you're teaching people? When did that happen?
Phew, I still feel like a super student, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, I think that there's, I think you're always doing both. You know, I think there was like they were in their mid 20s, and I feel like they were teaching me at the time, and I was probably, you know, maybe I was teaching someone else. Like now, I think there's, you know, like these things are great. I love
Yeah.
to be able to talk about my experience and maybe help someone. And there's just so much I'm still
Trying to suck in at the same
absorbing,
time.
and
Yeah.
you know how fast music moves and how fast the industry moves, and I feel like if you ever rest or you ever, like, my friends are still listening to whatever they were listening to in their mid 20s or something, and
It's
it's
not
like
valid anymore.
it's cool, and like
Right. You can
it's
still listen to
you
it,
can
but
like get those feelings, but if that's your person, if that's your job, and you're, you know, you're staying on top of everything, there's just something every day.
yeah,
It's like just like
exactly.
today with this sample rate thing. It's
Yeah,
like,
like somebody told me I had to get a
like,
PS5. I'm like, I have a PS3. I'm killing it. You know, I thought it was
yeah,
hot stuff. You know what I mean?
exactly,
But it ends up
exactly.
switching up that way. Okay, so that's really really cool that you still see yourself as a student. But even as a student, there's a point where you graduate, or you get an A on a test, and so in your world, it's like, what was your first success in the industry that you're like, okay, I'm in there. This is I'm locked into this. This is what I want to do.
Locked in. I think. I mean, you know, that band had a lot of, like, we were on the radio and we did some big things externally. It's also an interesting time because it was like the end of the. We were probably one of the last bands that went through that machine. Like, we did our record on tape. It cost a crazy amount of money.
Right.
We sold. I think we sold almost 90,000 copies of this record, and that was considered abject failure to the label.
In your
Like,
mind, you're like, we just
well, at the time when that model was like, throw tons of money at it. If you don't break gold, we'll just drop the band. You know,
oh yeah,
that
yeah.
thing, and like, so success.
And this is early 2000s.
This was like right. Well, actually, it was like 98, 99,
Okay, when the industry had a
right
lot of money and
before
was a give.
Napster, you know, descended upon the industry, and so there were a lot of like things that looked like success that happened, you
Hmm.
know, like cool stuff, you know. We played big shows, we had song on the radio and stuff like that, and but a lot of that stuff is ephemeral, as you know, and I think for me, what felt the most like the first time I felt real like success, it may have been like maybe something smaller, but it was when I was doing my own projects, and you know, we would achieve something,
With
get a
that,
license, or you know, achieve something that was something that I was attached to in that way, that I had ownership over, and that's something that's so different for every musician. Like, I would never put that on someone else who, you know, I had a lot of friends who just wanted to play the biggest stages as an instrumentalist or whatever, and that is super cool. And it's
right?
just like, I think part of the path is defining and being really honest about what
What your
feels,
goal? Yeah, what feels good and what's your goal, right?
yeah, like
Yeah.
for you. And my goal is not going to be the same as someone else's goal, and
Hmm.
that's why comparison sucks.
Yeah, it does, because what do you compare? You're comparing an apple that's green versus an apple that's red. They're both apples, and one somebody likes the green one, somebody likes the red one.
Yeah.
So now in your world, now that you're doing this full time, this is your main thing. Um, how do you manage what's like your work life balance? Because the music is something you like to do, um, but where do you find time to just be you and like just go to the beach
I don't know, but if you find out, let me know.
Okay. I'll try my best.
um, that's I think another thing that's super individual, like what the idea of what's balance.
Yeah.
Like, some people would be like, I can't believe, you know, when I talk to like family members and stuff, it's like they, it's nothing is appealing about my schedule and how much we work, but it's also, you know, it's like a choice that's like, if it feels gratifying, if it feels, you know, if you're being fed by it, then it's
Do it.
great, you
Yeah.
know. There's definitely times where that balance kind of tips the scale and you burn out a little bit or something. I mean, there are things that I do in life to balance myself out, but I think if you are this is the path that you choose, it's a pretty, you gotta understand that it's a pretty all encompassing
Yeah,
path, especially
definitely.
if you've got ambitions to do, if you're not doing it as a hobby or something, and you're trying to like feed yourself and your family.
So, did you
um,
go from hobby to professionalism, or was it always like that's what you want to do as a career?
I well, I went to school. I went to school for music, and I think I was just ignorant
Right.
in understanding what that meant. And then getting the first job, playing drums in this band that was signed to this label, it seemed that seemed so easy. And then I think there was always like a choice of paths. Like I think there were paths that I could have taken and still feel like I could take to make life easier.
Yeah.
Um, like I could be doing more session stuff or touring stuff, or commit to not do, I think I do a lot of my own artist stuff, and that takes a lot of time, and
Right.
so it's time that you have to take away from just full on producing or something like that, and those are decisions that are very personal. Like I don't think even my producer friends have a different calibration of that.
Of
Like
what it
they're
is.
like,
Yeah.
well, I do my own project, but it's more of a hobby, and I'm not gonna like prioritize that.
Right.
I'm gonna prioritize producing big records, or just putting, being, that's my identity. I want to be known as a producer, um and so it's just like how you cut up that pie graph of time.
That's cool. So I know for me, like I feel the same way. Like I produce, I record, I mix, I DJ. It's like it's all encompassing in our day and age because it's so easy to access the
Yeah, for
technology
sure.
that the second you touch it, you end up loving it. You like it. Um, do you have any suggestions for how do you make that decision if you like them all and you just want one to be your
Yeah, I
main thing?
actually think that's a really great question, because I feel like I've struggled with that um, a lot. And I would have to say that it changes. I think there were times that it made sense to press the gas down on certain things. Like there was a time where I think I needed to learn the skills, uh, you know, the skills to be a producer, the skills to be, I never really call myself an engineer, but I learned because I had
You
to.
had to, yeah.
And then, same thing with becoming a mixer. Like I used to work with the mixer for probably almost 20 records. I worked with this great mixer, um, and then at some point I was like, I really need to level up and just and like commit to learning that skill on a level that you can
Generate income
put out product that's decent enough,
to make it. Yeah.
and that takes a lot of time investment. It takes a lot of commitment,
So graphic
and
designing wasn't the one.
the what
Graphic design wasn't the main thing.
that like, well, I still do it. I loved it. I did this.
Wait, you made that shirt right there?
Yeah, I do it for all my projects, but it was, yeah, that's a good example. Like that was like a cushy job, and I could have easily kept doing that job and like
Hmm.
made a good living and then done music in the off time, but that didn't feel right to
Right.
me, and it was always like there was more desire um, to achieve more in music. So yeah, so I quit, and I made a jump where it was really scary to
Yeah.
like float there, and um, but yeah, how do you determine? I think you just got to keep checking in with yourself.
Yeah.
I think there's times where, there were things I wanted to accomplish as a drummer, play certain stages, play certain festivals, whatever, and I did those things, and then I was like, okay, I think you could either keep pushing on that path and bigger and play, or assess and be like, okay, well, is this
Is this really?
is this feeling like, yeah, is this filling me up? Is this what my soul feels like it needs to express?
Hmm.
And for me, it wasn't. I needed, you know, I really felt like I needed to tell my own stories, but I was really afraid to do that
Yeah, man.
for a long time. So I actually did like put a lot of other things in front of that for a long time, even producing. Like I love being a producer. I love working with artists, And also, I think there was a point where I was hiding a little bit behind that identity instead of being like, I want to be an artist and I want to put my own stuff out and stand behind it. And it took time. It took a long time
Long time, yeah.
to break down those fears, to commit to doing my own stuff. And that's different for everyone. Like my fears are different from someone else's. So
Right, and I see everybody in the chat saying the same stuff, that they have to go through the same things now. Even with Josephine saying sleep is helping, you know.
yeah,
But you know, we want a lot of things in our lives. I know
yeah,
there are a lot of tombstones out there with stories that have never been written, and I
uh-huh.
think that that's something that we all have to keep in mind, because we can do something that's making all the income we want and we kind of like it, but if it's not the thing that feeds
Yeah.
us and keeps us going,
And
we'll hit that tombstone a lot faster than we think. Yeah.
sometimes you get trapped because things are comfortable, or even in music when you're like, I should feel, and it's always like there's multiple truths happening, right? Like
Yeah.
there were times where I was like, wow, I'm doing things that I never thought I would do, and
Hmm.
these gigs, like I feel like really grateful to be doing these gigs, and at the same time, there's something that's not feeling quite
Right.
right,
Yeah.
and if I keep going, I'm gonna continue to get more gigs in that arena,
Hmm.
and if you don't make that conscious decision to be deliberate about your path, then you keep reacting to
You
what
keep
keeps
getting
getting handed to you and the
reverted.
opportunities,
Yeah.
and people look at you that way because that's what you're putting out into the universe, and so they're like, oh, you're a producer, I'm going to keep sending you more
Production.
production,
Yeah.
and or you're a drummer, I'm going to call you for drumming gigs or something like that. And so I think it's just got to be you just got to be honest,
Yeah.
at all times.
So use the secret, they say, is speaking it into existence. Yeah. So whatever you really want to do is just make sure that you're focused on that. Yes, we all have all these side things, but we just got to focus on that main thing. So that was really great. I know we got a few questions in the chat, but we can open those back up. Once we get to his production, we're gonna listen to a song today and kind of dive deep into that, which is gonna
Nice.
be super cool. I'm really excited. I got to hear the record, and you all got to hear a snippet of it in the intro video. So if there are any questions, go ahead and throw them up there right now, and we'll get them loaded up. But for now, we're going to play the video again for those who joined the meeting a little late, and we'll let you all get that quick bio on the amazing Alex Wong, and we'll get back with our production in just a moment.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Producers Unpacked, where we will be unpacking the stories and strategies of music producers and industry professionals so that you can use their lessons to find your path to success in the music industry and beyond. So, this will be broken up into 3 parts. We start with the life story of how our guest became a producer, artist, and alike. Then we go into their first opportunities and how they were achieved. Then we unpack the production of one of their projects, giving a little gem/cheat code on how they get their awesome sound or projects completed. And I'm your host, Jay Pearson, deeply immersed in the world of music production and licensing with a burning desire to help others excel in their music careers. My own musical endeavors have led to my work being featured in commercials for Adidas, CarMax, MTV, and collaborations with outstanding recording artists. So today, on Producers Unpacked, we're taking a deep dive into Alex Wong. So Alex is a Latin Grammy-nominated artist, producer, and activist who is all about creating music that helps people find themselves and share their essence with the world. You might have heard his music in movies like The Last Song and The Lincoln Lawyer, or on TV shows like True Blood, Ray Donovan, and One Tree Hill. He has also graced the stages of major festivals like Coachella, Stagecoach, Outside Lands, and NPR's Mountain Stage. Not only that, but Alex has lent his production skills to artists such as Delta Ray and Vienna Tang. In 2021, Alex launched the Quiet Voice Fund with the core idea that you don't need to be loud to be strong. His Show Yourself benefit concert series raised over $16,000 for the fund. This year, Alex introduced the Permission Parties, a unique experience where each track from his upcoming album Permission is paired with a Chinese-inspired dish that embodies a common emotion. Through this, he addresses his own struggle with feeling permitted to take up space, especially as a second-generation Chinese American. His goal is to empower everyone, particularly those on the fringes, to embrace his strategies stories, and occupy their space. The initial 5-night Nashville run of the permission parties was a hit, leading to the first ever listening and tasting tour across the US this fall. So before we get into it, if you want to find out more about Home and what we're doing here, go ahead and hit up helpingourmusic.org to find out more. And now without further ado, let's get going with Producers Unpacked.
All right. We are back at it, and we're about to open up this track that Alex has been so gracious and the juice for, and we are about to have some fun. So, without further ado, let's do it. So, tell us about this song. What genre is it, and maybe the main instruments that are in it, and then we can unpack the track.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually one of my artist projects.
Okay.
This is not released. It's going to be released next year. The genre, I've been working on that one for a while.
Yeah.
I've started calling my music second generation Americana.
Second generation American. So why? Why would you say
So
that?
being in Nashville, a lot of my community here, the songwriter community, they definitely work in Americana. I think there's a lot of bleed between what I consider what I do, singer-songwriter, acoustic, indie folk, Americana, these genres that all kind of blur together. And something I noticed about, I had not really heard of Americana till I moved here, and I didn't really understand what sonically differentiated Americana from if acoustic, folk, singer songwriter, all these words that sometimes are a little bit meaningless, but I did notice that there was a culture around it, and it was almost like there's a visual. There's a visual component. There's something that you can see and be like, oh yeah, that person's Americana,
right?
And I was like, I was just thinking a lot about that and thinking about, well, what is that? Why is that? And stuff like that. And I, with this record, which is sort of the first time I've dived into, really allowed myself to kind of turn that lens on my own identity as an Asian American, and I think coming up in the industry, a lot of times I did not feel comfortable writing about those things, and I was told as much by people in the industry that this is not accessible, this is not relatable, whatever, and so I guess the idea of I feel like I was, I feel very culturally American, and I feel like I make American music.
Yeah.
And so it's just my way of saying that these are American songs, but this is a different American experience.
Okay. So that makes you ask, do you go to see family overseas at all, or?
No, my family lives in the
States.
States. Yeah. I mean, I have been over to China one time and visited some very distant relatives, and that was an amazing trip. But my roots are very, in the Asian American experience, and I'm second generation. My grandmother on my mother's side was even born in Chinatown, LA. So
Awesome.
that's three generations of Americans, and so I'm really interested in kind of like widening the lens of what American music, in this sense could be, and what stories, could be part of that genre, using sort of the tools of what, storytelling and those sorts of things in Americana music, and just, maybe expanding what that definition could be.
That's beautiful. Well, I'm sure you all are wanting to hear this song fully. So let's maybe go all the way through the first chorus of it, and then we'll kind of unpack the track from beginning and see what we get.
Sure.
fever dream. You had your grandma's eyes. Everything was cold and clean. I didn't recognize till I heard you start to sing, speaking in the devil's tongue. What did all the struggle bring? What did we become? Between all of the living and the ghosts we cannot see, between the ones we left behind and the ones we'll never meet, between the hidden alleys and the streets of the American dream, we walk in the spaces between. Cities full of hungry ghosts.
What a track.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, the spaces in between. That's a really, it's so hard to get a good chorus phrase, and I feel like you nailed it on that one.
Thank you.
So I know I was gonna ask about the drums and stuff first, but what kind of evoked the lyrics? I know you told it's the basic story of what you were going through in your life and your experience, but for the delivery, how did that come about? Was it music first, vocal second, or?
Yeah. So actually, this started as a commission.
Really?
Yeah, I got commissioned to write the music and narrate this app for the California Migration Museum. It was like an augmented reality tour of Chinatown, and you can go to Chinatown, San Francisco. You can hold your phone up at a certain, street corner and start the tour, and if you look through your phone, you can see like what Chinatown looked like 100 years ago.
Wow.
And I had written this song as sort of the end of the tour because the tour follows this main character who's a historical figure in Chinatown who was sort of responsible for the modern aesthetic of Chinatown, and just real long story short, he created sort of the look that we see when you close your eyes and think of Chinatown, this sort of fantastical, very exaggerated aesthetic, which didn't exist in China at all. It was done very deliberately to attract white tourists,
Yeah.
and it was a creation. Like he worked with white architects to create this look, and 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 it was to enable the Chinese community to stay in where they were in the center of San Francisco, because they were getting kicked out after the earthquake. They were trying to get moved down to Hunters Point, and so this was a plan to get them to stay in that area. They were like, we're going to bring in tourist dollars. It's going to be great for the economy, all this stuff, and it worked, and they stayed. However, I think when I started to like dive into this project, I was like, man, I wonder what he would think now. Like he, he achieved his goal of being able to stay, but then he also created something I don't think he would have predicted, which is this perception of perpetually alien, perpetually other, super exoticized version of Chinese people that was almost like a sideshow, and that kind of had all these ramifications 100 years later. So the basis for the song was thinking about, okay, well, if he had a chance to talk to his great grandkid,
Yeah.
would he think it was a success? And he sees what the kid's life is now, and the good and the bad, and would he feel like that was the right call? And so that's where the song came from. And so I'm singing from the grandfather's point of view to his grandkid.
That is so cool. That right there is a gem in itself, and how Americana definitely is a story.
Yeah, and the other part is he was born in America in the 1800s, so he's an American, but
Really?
yet had to go through all of this, and he actually left at one point, and they wouldn't let him back in because the Exclusion Act had taken place, and so this is an American story. Like these, like there's not even like any hyphen to it. It's just an American story, and that's why that genre name to me appeals to me because
Yeah,
these are American stories.
but they're in between. That's so wild. So let's open up the track again. So I'd love to know about these drums because
Sure.
they're laid back. They're good in the mix. You know, I know this isn't the final of
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah, this
you're
is
really
a
close.
you're getting a sneak preview of an in-process mix, by the way, everybody.
So everybody clap it up for that. But yeah, so tell me about these drums. Uh, how were they created? Because there's like a doubling in the 2 and the 4 count. That's not a snare, right? Is it the drum
Right.
again, or
So there's two elements that make up the drums, and I'll just solo a couple. So this is an electric, a programmed kick track that has a couple little, tom accents and stuff like that. And that's going kind of throughout the song. And then I played an acoustic kit on top of that. And that's just the floor tom. So they're both emphasizing different, backbeats. So like you've got this 4 on the floor thing that to me keeps the pulse moving. And then this is like puts a halftime feel overlaid on top of it.
boom, chat?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
So that was kind of my thinking. I wanted something that was laid back, but also felt like it was pushing a little bit.
Driving the story. And so when the chorus hits, does it get bigger right there?
Yeah. So the chorus.
Doing all of the living and the ghosts we cannot see.
So the drums are still so far doing the same thing until later they sort of develop more. But you're bringing in a bunch of. So I bring in the strings. I bring in some other instruments at the chorus. And then the strings really make their entrance here. This is like their big announcement.
Yeah, so quick question about these. Are those real strings in this track?
They are, yeah.
Okay, so you actually had somebody play or you played it.
I did not, but I wrote the parts, and then so I feel very lucky to have some friends in town who are, just badasses, and
Yeah.
I use them on a lot of records, and they track. One guy's name is Gideon Klein. He's sort of just like a total alien freak of nature. And his wife Jose is also plays. They both play violin, viola. He plays cello as well, and he also shreds at guitar and bass. And it's just like kind
So
of
the fact
gross.
that he's a shredder, that translates really well into violin, especially for stuff like that.
Yeah, and like in Nashville, like I remember when I came to Nashville and I was like, yeah, I'm a multi-instrumentalist because I'm like average at a bunch of things.
Yeah.
Here you can't really say that because there are people who are like disgustingly good at
Yeah.
many multiple instruments. So you just got to be careful who you say that, what crowd you say that to.
Yeah, don't say it to everybody.
Yeah,
You'll definitely be like in for a rude awakening.
But my process has been I'll compose parts and I'll orchestrate them and then I'll send them to Gideon and Jose, and they'll multi-track or whatever I want. So sometimes if it's like a quartet, we'll get quartet players. Sometimes I'll track them at my studio, sometimes at his studio, and we'll do usually like close mics on each instrument and then a few ambient mics. In this case, this is more of like I think we did 8. I usually do 8 passes of if we're doing single instruments, I'll do 8 passes. If they like to play. I like when they play like 2 violins on the same part together, so they'll do 4 passes of that, and then we take stereo rooms of each pass.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically what all of these like millions of tracks.
So what's your go-to mic for recording strings?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on where we are. I mean, I love in my studio. I have a couple ribbon mics I like to use.
Okay.
It depends. It really depends. I also have like KM184s if it should be brighter. For the rooms, it can be anything. I use my U87 sometimes in the room, or M149.
Okay.
But I typically go for darker string sounds,
Okay.
or if I often find myself shaving off a lot of
High end.
like high end on that.
Yeah, because the ribbon
Um,
mic is gonna take all of that in, but that is essentially where the lushness is coming from.
yeah.
And then when you do EQ it out, it still sounds really good.
Yeah, and I think on this one I was really going for a certain sound which to me sounds very old
Hmm.
and like an old record player or something. So like it's very carved off. It's not super high fidelity sound, but that was what fit the track.
That sounds great.
Never meet between the hidden alleys and the streets of the American dream. We walk in the spaces between.
And then later they kind of get their time to shine. I really like non-diatonic, like stuff that's kind of a little out, like melodically.
Not staying true to the scale, but you're in there. But it's like
Just a lot of weird bends and that sort of thing. Yeah.
it's a little bit of 007 in there.
Yeah, exactly. So,
That is
yeah.
a beautiful thing. So I do have another question for you. So let's talk about the bass in the song because it's a really beautiful bass sound. And is that a upright that's doing that? Is it a cello?
So there's a couple different bass instruments providing bass. One is this Juno synth.
Oh, the Juno.
So that's like the fat low end part.
Okay. So I
And
still
then-
hear some of the growl in it. Like you didn't take it all out.
Oh yeah. There's
Let
definitely
that
like
stay.
some teeth in there. But so this one I did put a bass guitar on. So this is really staying in the higher register. So it's not really competing. It's not trying to provide the low end. This is more of
It's
a
just
melodic
giving
thing.
a melodic rhythm to that bass area.
Yeah, and so the Juno is really just this bed that's just kind of.
So is that Juno also? Does it have a pad inside of that patch, or do you have a separate pad that's kind of creating that atmosphere? Because when you unmuted, I heard something outside of the strings. As well.
So yes, so there's also well, there's a lot of high frequency atmosphere stuff, but there's another Juno that basically is reinforcing the piano.
Mhm.
So here's like, I'll just play. Like here's like the basic piano parts, just hitting the chords, and so there's a Juno that doubles that. So it's like it. See,
Gives that classic.
it just
movie
adds
sound,
like
really.
a little lower end to the piano part, so it's just reinforcing that. I do that a lot actually in my productions.
I mean, it's a standard sound. You know, honestly, you hear that in many records where to get that big emotional feel, you gotta put some type of pad with your piano.
Yeah,
to
totally.
make it
Yeah,
work.
yeah. Nobody's satisfied with acoustic instruments anymore.
No, it's not gonna happen. It's like if it doesn't sound like a literal movie that I'm watching while I'm listening to the radio, it doesn't count.
Yeah, no.
But I feel like you were able to put all these elements together to make one cohesive piece that really does tell the story without even the lyrics being there. Like I can feel the walkthrough of this emotional journey that people go through from every culture that has come here and deals with adversity or trying to make it or be accepted. So this song sounds like finding acceptance to me, and that's what I really appreciate about it. So yeah, tell me about are there any other elements that I'm not aware of in here
There's
that
a
are really
couple
cool?
other, yeah, I just one element. So I was like, I was kind of got stuck at one point. I was like, I feel like we need something. I think the challenge when you're making these vibey tracks where you do want to kind of let them vibe out and zone out and get into a place and sort of occupy that vibey space, but then do they get boring or do they get sleepy,
Right.
And so I was trying to figure out ways to subtly, move things along. And so one thing I added is this, which is sort of doing this 3/2 pattern
The
through the
music
whole thing. It
box.
never really wraps around. It just keeps going. So it's
spaces between.
Wow. Until you did that with the hand motion, I didn't even know that was there, but you could feel that similar motion. More so in the drums. And like,
yeah. So like with it works. Yeah. So it's meant to interact with the drum part. Um, so it wraps around occasionally, but
right.
And also there's an envelope that's opening really slowly over the whole course of it.
Yeah, so you're basically high passing and opening that back up. And, wow.
And then so on top of all of that, my friend Josh Kaler, who's also a super dope producer in town, he played pedal steel. So there's a lot of, he's sort of floating, on top of everything.
There it is. That might be the cherry on top that pulled that final emotional piece in.
Yeah, he's such an amazing player. So I feel like that was all the elements in this one.
That's a beautiful thing.
And then there's the sort of like ooh part.
So what mic were you using to record the vocals?
What did we use? Well, so the main vocal. So we did a lot of this at Sonic Ranch in Texas.
Okay.
I never get. I never. How do I say this? Never allow myself to spend that kind of money on myself.
Yeah,
and
understood.
this project, I was like, I'm gonna do it. I've always wanted to record it, for my own projects. There, I've taken other projects to Sonic Ranch, and so I budgeted for it, and we went there for like, I don't know, 4 days or something, and we did 6 songs, and
yeah.
like it was insane. But so we did the drums, the piano, the bass, and the vocals there. So we were using some ridiculous. Let's see, what did we use? I mean, we were doing a shootout between like a 251, a U47, a U67, like some old U67.
Yeah.
I think that's what we ended up with was the U67, which are just things you don't have. I don't have
most
around.
people don't.
Yeah,
Especially when they're limited to begin with.
yeah, and they were just so beautiful and sounded, so great. So really glad we got like these vocal. I feel like you can really tell that these vocals were tracked on.
A
you
good
know,
mic,
yeah, and like I usually track on. I take my so I have an M149 and a Royer 121, and I actually put them together and record a lot of vocals with them together.
So basically creating a stereo image, but not really.
Not stereo. I mean, I have to line up the phase like exactly
to make it work.
but
yeah.
I just like the fullness, like the ribbon mic to me gets all this cool like like it's just mid and warm and all this, and then you get all this detail from the Neumann, and so
you're not doubling your vocals.
not that way. I do sometimes double them, but that is not a way to double. That's just a way to get more sound.
Yeah. So
and it's also really dangerous because if you're a little out of phase and you kind of like fuck up your whole
mix.
Yeah.
It's just like done.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all are bored by that kind of conversation, but like phasing, if you have questions, type them in the chat, whatever.
So just in short, like if you have two microphones, if one is further from the other one, when you play it back, there's going to be a delay. and that delay can start to sound wavy, and it can be cool, right?
It
But a
can be
lot of
cool.
times,
It sounds like a flange or like a phase pedal. It's kind of does that kind of thing. Um, looks
yeah,
like we got
sometimes
some
that just
questions.
really messes you up, you know. But yeah, most people on this are gonna love the nerdy talk.
Okay,
Um,
perfect.
and at this point, though, let's open it up for a few questions if there are any. So this is the last 10 seconds for that, and then we'll probably close out. But one, I'll say thank you for playing this song. I know that this is a real personal record, and a lot of times it's not easy to show people the inner workings of it. It's like I really just want my audience to hear that final product,
Yeah.
more so than the over process this, that, or the other. So yeah, really thank you for that. It gave me
Yeah,
a good insight because I don't do Americana music, but I do a lot of ballads, and there's many
Yeah.
similarities with how you track and put stuff
Right.
together.
And it's like, I mean, you think it's like it's the same instruments, it's the same structural, songwriting structure.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this different? Why is this genre considered something else? And why do people have a perception of usually, artists of color doing the same kind of song, but it's not called that?
Right. So I'm glad that you're in Americana, and I'm thankful that you are the second generation. So it's interesting to see because I'm third generation in my family. My family's from Central America and abroad. On my dad's side, they're from the United States, but Native American culture. So it's really interesting to still have the same struggles where it's like you do know that I'm an original here since I was born here, and everything I know is of this place. So when you say, "Hey, make me a reggae song or something," or "Hey, make me a traditional Chinese song," you're like, it's like,
Yeah. You could intellectually do it maybe, but
right,
it's not something that you absorbed in that way, or maybe it is. I don't know, but yeah, it's
yeah,
different.
yeah. So for everybody out there, stay true to your music. And so, what was it like co-producing with Josh Kaler? And did it change your approach?
Yeah, I mean, Josh and I have been really good friends for a long time here. He was one of the first people I met here, and I think we met and we connected because we do similar styles of producing, in that we often work with artists where we're playing most or all of the instruments and kind of creating, a lot of times it's a solo artist and we're creating the sonic, world
Environment, yeah.
for the record. And so I think our processes, we had a lot of common ground, and we both play different instruments and sort of have similar sensibilities. But I mean, he's a fantastic producer, and it was interesting to, first of all, I have never worked with an outside producer on my own stuff before.
It's scary.
And it's scary, and also, producers often are just alone, like hermits in their cave. We don't
All
get
the
to
time.
we don't
You
get to
don't
play
get to
with
be there.
other people that much. And so that was fun. It was fun to watch how someone else would solve a problem
Yeah.
or approach, a part. And I think that he's probably a little more reactive. Like he likes to, like I really like to sketch like a real pretty cohesive idea, and that's just, I enjoy that. I enjoy uh like being really deliberate about arrangement and about
Yeah.
parts, and like know what I'm going into with the recording part, so that when I'm actually tracking I can focus on being creative in the tracking part and not have to be like, well, is this part going to work with the part 16 parts down the line?
Down
And
the
I
line,
kind
yeah.
of have a map, and I think
And he's more like,
he's a little
just let it
more
happen.
he's a little more reactive, and like
Yeah.
he's a little, I think that his palette is usually more band instruments a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so he'll go for more like band instruments, but he'll be more like, let's just react to it and see what happens, and then kind of, and I think there's obviously beauty in both
Right.
ways. And so
And
I
when
think
you mesh them, you kind of have the ebb and flow.
this record was definitely both of those approaches on different songs. And so that was scary to be like, okay, I'll just let you react, and
Yeah.
and then sometimes we ended up somewhere like super cool and unexpected, and sometimes I was like, let's take it back and let's
and
do it.
organize
Let's
this.
let's organize it a little bit and be a little more deliberate about it.
And so that's what I've learned over time is I do everything by myself, which is cool, right? You learn all these tricks and
Yeah.
trades, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's better just to call the person. It's like, you do this beautifully, and
Yes.
you've
Yeah.
taken most of your life to be good at this.
Yeah.
Why would I not call you?
Yeah.
Right? And that was hard to do,
Yeah.
and it's still hard sometimes when you're like, I could do it though.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You have
Totally.
this pride about you because you want it to be your thing. But a lot of times we forget that the only reason you even speak the language you speak is because of the millions of people who have created the words for you.
Yeah.
So,
And I would add on to that like if in music, I think something that separates, I don't how to phrase this right, but I think skill that I have found really tough and also very valuable is that ability to like be objective
yeah.
and be like, okay, my version is not quite cutting it, even though I worked really hard on this and I studied this skill or whatever. This other person can do it way better and faster and like just like when I was mixing, like learning about mixing, it's like you work your ass off on mixes and then you're like, I finally got it, and then you listen to some other mix and you're like,
You're like, I didn't
fuck.
even get close.
And just knowing when you're there or knowing like when you're at prime time with any of that stuff,
Mhm.
and knowing when you're not quite there, and it's okay if you're not quite there, and just but if you're trying to put out product that is of a certain level or that can compete, then you have to have that objectivity at some point and not be too precious about firing yourself or
Right.
you know.
Yeah. All right. Well, at this point, I'm going to ask you one last question. This is an easy one. Thank you for everybody being in the chat. Make sure you follow him on Instagram. You can go to homeformusic.org. And I think that's right. Julian was telling me to say it the right way. So homeformusic.org if you want to find out more and check out what we do here. But what is one quote that you use more than you need to? It could be for music, life, or
Oh,
whatever.
God. I don't know. My wife's on the chat. She might be able to answer that better.
Oh, really? But
Um,
anything that you would say just as a
I
closing
say
line.
"holy cow" way too much.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
There it is. So it's a reactionary phrase, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, thank
Probably,
you all
yeah.
so much for being here. Alex, thank you again for joining us and showing us what you do. I know that there's going to be a lot of value taken from this, and I feel like everybody in the Zoom had a good time. So yeah, thank you all so much, and be safe out here. I'll see you all later on the next Producers Unpacked.
Thanks,
Peace.
everybody.